Now, we're going to start off with Lebanon. Israel, they withdrew from Al Khiyam a couple of days ago after intense attacks from Hezbollah. Israel carried out very significant attacks to take down the top figures in the Hezbollah movement. However, they failed to take down the capabilities when it comes to Hezbollah and attacking Israel, both deep inside of Palestinian occupied territories and on the borders where Israel partially invaded Lebanon, alongside the positioning of the genocide forces next to the Lebanese border. So today they confirmed they had 36 operations. Hezbollah had 36 operations, one of their most intense days, and that's becoming a norm. The most intense day when it comes to Hezbollah had approximately 47 operations, but now 30 to 40 operations a day, that's the norm. Now, just to remind everyone, before the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and the escalation that came from Israel against Lebanon, Hezbollah used to carry out between 10 to 12 operations that were very limited to the northern parts of occupied Palestine. They did not go in deep, and they were very limited with limited numbers and types of weapons. However, the scale started to be raised. Hezbollah started to up the level when it comes to the intensification of the attacks on the genocide forces and the introduction of new weapons almost every single day. So even today they declared they started using 2 new weapons on Israel. Yesterday they had a massive attack on central Israel next to Ben Gurion Airport, in particular Tzrifin base that Israel locates next to the Ben Gurion Airport. But now they had a massive attack all across of Israel. So they published that on their website, which is Al-Manar, the media wing of Hezbollah. They said the Islamic resistance bombed the Krayot settlement complex north of the occupied city of Haifa with a missile salvo at 1:50 as part of its confrontation with the ongoing Israeli aggression on Lebanon, and in support of our steadfast Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, and in support of their valiant and honorable resistance, and in defense of Lebanon and its people. The resistance bombed the Stella Maris naval base, which is a strategic base for naval monitoring and surveillance on the northern coast, northwest of Haifa at 4:25 with a missile salvo. Once again, the Islamic resistance bombed the El Yakim base, which contains training camps affiliated with the northern command of the Israeli enemy army, south of the occupied city of Haifa with a qualitative missile salvo. They continued that they targeted a gathering of enemy forces in the Hanita settlement with a rocket salvo at 1:50, 2 o'clock, and 2:05, another gathering in the Liman settlement, in conjunction with targeting a military gathering in the Sa'ar settlement north of the city of Nahariya with a rocket salvo, and at 4:30, a gathering in the Shomera settlement. They continued in the context of confronting Israeli aggression. At 3 o'clock, the resistance targeted enemy gatherings in the Ramim barracks east of the town of the Maroun al-Ras, in the Doviv settlement, and also Yiftach settlement with a salvo of rockets. At 3:15, the resistance bombarded with rockets a movement of the Israeli enemy army forces at the Fatima Gate on the Lebanese-Palestinian border opposite the town of Kfar Kila. The Islamic resistance fighters ambushed an infantry force that tried to advance towards the town of Yarun, killing and wounding its members after monitoring its movements. And within the framework they added, they issued a warning to a number of settlements in the north at 4:30. Islamic resistance fighters targeted the Kiryat Shmoni settlement with a rocket salvo, simultaneously with the Al-Manar settlements. At 6:20, the resistance bombed Al-Baghdadi site and the Yiftah barracks with a rocket salvo. Intense. They added more attacks that they carried out today. which in total lead us to 36 operations, including the attacks that they conducted yesterday. And here they mentioned something very important. The Islamic resistance called on the settlers who were warned of the necessity of evacuating their settlements not to return to them, as they have been transformed into military targets due to the fact that they contain command headquarters, barracks, and military factories, artillery positions, and missile bases, and stations for logistical staff services for the forces that are attacking the Lebanese territories. The interesting part is the warning part, which is something that we are used to hearing from the Israeli side, always claiming that the resistance fighters or anyone fighting against them uses civilian buildings. When they began using civilian buildings ever since the beginning of the war, and they established core military and strategic hubs within civilian territories, including command bases inside of Israeli territory. So they go ahead before anyone says anything, and they tell you, no, it's them. They use the human shields, and they have themselves within territory. And look at where Hezbollah launched their missiles from. All of Hezbollah's missile launches are from these areas, mountainous areas, from under the ground bunkers. They have sophisticated networks. All of a sudden, you see a truck popping up with a battery, and bang, or from under the ground, and the deal is sealed. Nothing from civilian buildings. However, on the Israeli side, and Hezbollah confirmed this with many footages that they've released previously, they constantly use the civilian buildings as command centers. And in many cases, Hezbollah have advanced knowledge when Israel starts to use these locations, and they attack them before Israel announces or carries out any operation from these locations. And what that tells us, again, is about the massive Israeli failure when it comes to Lebanon. Don't forget, Israel has over 5 divisions on the Lebanese borders, enough forces to go up until Beirut, really. And they're trying to carry out strikes in multiple parts of Lebanon now, not just the south. We had an attack on the eastern coastal part, the eastern part of Lebanon, not the coastal part, sorry, in Baalbek areas. And they also had an attack on a coastal city today. They killed approximately 45 people in Lebanon in civilian locations. And like we said the other day, with regards to Baalbek, you're talking about an ancient city, tens of thousands of years old, with lots of heritage and very important sites. Yet Israel doesn't find it like abnormal to target these locations and these cities, which leads us to Gaza. In Gaza, we still have 80,000 people in the north, in the most northern parts of Gaza. These people do not want to leave. So starvation, malnutrition, no food is getting in, no food at all is getting into North Gaza, no water is going into North Gaza. Israel is striking every single day refugee shelters in North Gaza, people's bodies everywhere, schools housing refugees, UN refugee centers, hospitals, forcing hospital patients in the Kamal Adwan hospital to go down from the top floor to the lower floor because they constantly bomb the hospitals. I mean, the situation in North Gaza is beyond description, really, how bad it is. And it is in line with an Israeli strategy. And now we have a confirmation of this strategy. This confirmation came from Israel, where they said that it's already a strategy now to not allow anyone in North Gaza to remain there. The IDF had a confirmation in multiple reports inside of Israel saying that, well, it's a policy now. We need to get the people out of North Gaza. And this was reported in The Guardian alongside a couple of other websites too. And for the first time, this means that Israel is admitting that they are conducting indeed a campaign of ethnic cleansing Of course, their claim is that it's a fighting zone. We will not allow the people to go back. But again, there is no confirmation as to whether they will change that in the future or not. And when you tie that with the settlement or the squatting establishment's ambitions to go and live in Gaza, again, they go hand in hand. Ethnic cleansing, destruction, and depraved squatters come and build their houses on top of infants' bodies and innocent people's bodies and their ruins. Exactly how they established Israel. So what you're witnessing today, ladies and gentlemen, in front of your eyes is how Israel established itself in 1948 in a reenactment. This is exactly what's happening. In a more brutal reenactment, but this is how Israel was established. Israel was established on terror, destruction, ethnic cleansing, manipulation, propaganda, and blaming the victims with that they commit. This is exactly what they're doing, to a level where some of their ministers called what's happening now the Gaza Nakba. And I'm talking with ministers in the Netanyahu government. They say it's the Nakba of Gaza, including their troops. They know exactly what they're doing. And they know and they have the intentions to ethnically cleanse not only the northern part of Gaza. This is just the beginning. But you still have some people in these areas. Why? Because they have nowhere else to go. And wherever they go, people are targeted everywhere else. And still to this day, you have some people who try and justify what Israel is doing, although it's blatant that they are committing an act of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and multiple war crimes that haven't been really committed in history, what they're doing. Which leads us to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. So we're having a war, a genocide in Gaza. We have a government in Israel that is very vocal in its plan and intention to ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people, and they also have plans to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians from the West Bank, and they also have plans to ethnically cleanse the Palestinian citizens of Israel. How? You have people inside of Israel, including the finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, who said a couple of years back to a Palestinian MK, Palestinian with Israeli citizenship MK, that Ben Gurion made a mistake in 1948 and he should have expelled all of you. And now they're having this law. Now, of course, every law in Israel, it starts with terror. It starts with something scary. What is this law that they're talking about? It's called the law to deport families of those who commit actions inside of Israel, or what Israel labels as terrorism. Something that, of course, does not exist when it comes to any Jewish citizen of Israel. But hey, you're talking about a state that calls itself a Jewish state that is, in fact, a Jewish supremacy, and that built its core on racism, supremacy, and hate and ethnic cleansing. So this is the law that I'm talking to you about here. That Hamas actually had a comment on that law. The approval of the law to deport Palestinians of 1948 is a violation of the most basic human rights standards. Here we have Hamas confirming that the Knesset's approval of the law of the expulsion and deportation of Palestinian families from inside Palestinian-occupied 1948 territories in Jerusalem under the pretext that one of its members carried out suicide operations against the occupation reinforces the hostile and racist approach and the policy forced displacement against our people in all places where they are present. In a press statement today, Thursday, Hamas called on the international community and human rights institutions to condemn this law, which violates the most basic standard human rights. So this law is saying that if you commit an act of what Israel describes as terror, your family can be deported. Your family can be deported. But if you are a Jewish Israeli and you go and deliberately kill Palestinians for fun, children, let alone commit a genocide by your army, you are hailed, you are a hero. If you rape prisoners, you are a hero. If you commit the worst crimes against humanity, you are a hero. in this country. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about in Israel. And these laws that they are putting in place now just prove time after time that you're talking about a pariah state that does not belong to the world, really. It's fully stripped of any human aspect. It doesn't have any regard to international law, to basic human rights. And they do not have a right to exist when they enforce such things on every citizen that they disapprove of. Now, all of the indications are showing that they are carrying out these plans in a strategic manner. So they are beginning with Gaza. They want to continue down to the West Bank and deal with the Palestinian citizens inside of Israel that they call Arab, because they, of course, deny the existence of a Palestinian nationality. And now, by what they're doing, expand to other parts in the region, Lebanon, and you have statements about Jordan and Sinai as well. And if they achieve any success when it comes to these locations, we wouldn't be surprised if they go to other locations. You are talking about an expansionist, neo-colonialist entity that is carrying out a calculated operation, delusional to a very large extent, because they have an assumption or a hope that they would somehow succeed, although we are not seeing any sign of success when it comes to the front where they began with the latest round of escalation, and I'm talking about Gaza. The situation is totally hopeless for them in Lebanon. In Lebanon, we've already had talks from over a week ago that we are close to a ceasefire and it could only take 2 weeks and what have you. And I know that we've had previous talks when it comes to a ceasefire, and it all was baseless, really. But the fact that they are saying that, and we in fact have things on the ground that indicate there is a certain withdrawal, show that they are not getting what they want. Whether or not Benjamin Netanyahu has a yes man as a defense minister, which makes him the ultimately the defense minister in Israel and gives him so much more power and lack of scrutiny and resistance from within when it comes to the campaign. But you need success on the ground. And are they finding the success on the ground? They are not finding the success on the ground, which leads me to the next subject that I want to talk to you about. The Israeli Broadcasting Authority said today that they are studying, Israel is studying again, what they call a preemptive strike on Iraq. According to them, they are seeing certain movements coming from Iraq that are coming with simultaneous reports about Iran transferring weapons to Iraq now, more advanced missiles and more advanced UAVs that indicate that Iran is preparing an attack on Israel from Iraqi territories, not just from Iranian territories. There is nothing to confirm that they will. However, it's not unlikely from Israel to carry out a limited strike on Iraq. It would be problematic for Israel because it's very difficult to stop any attacks coming on Israel from Iraq, especially when it comes to the UAVs. Usually when it comes to the Iraqi resistance, they launch UAVs at Israel that come generally through Syria and reach the Golan Heights. However, they've had other attacks coming on coastal ports inside of Israel, central Israel, and also the southern part of Israel, in many cases coordinated with the Ansarullah from Yemen. And there is no confirmation that Iran will be doing something from Iraq. As a matter of fact, I think the Iranian response is going to come from Iranian territories primarily, because if they're talking about something more advanced than previous attacks on Israel, that is most likely going to come from Iran. They have the infrastructure, they have the weapons, and they have everything under control, and they do not have US presence like there is US presence in Iraq and there is US presence in Syria as well. Which leads me to Donald Trump. Putin today congratulated Donald Trump. He had an hour and a half long speech talking about general things, but he also congratulated Donald Trump. And as a matter of fact, he said that the way he survived the assassination attempt and went back up was courageous, and he would not rule out having a communication with him. Trump later on said, I did not speak to Putin yet, but I might speak with Putin sometime soon. These things are very important, especially when it comes to resolving the situation in Ukraine. Which leads me to this point. We had a report saying that one of Donald Trump's proposals when it comes to Ukraine is to have a clause that postpones any potential membership, NATO membership of Ukraine for at least 20 years. So we had this report in the Kiev Independent saying Trump's team mulls postponing Ukraine's NATO membership for at least 20 years based on an article that came from Wall Street Journal. One idea within the US President-elect Donald Trump's team for ending Russia's war involves delaying Kiev's NATO membership for at least 20 years in exchange for continued arms supplies, the Wall Street Journal reported on November 6th, citing 3 sources close to Trump. Trump, who won the presidential vote on November 5th, has repeatedly said that he would end the war within 24 hours and get the US out of Ukraine. That's not 24 hours after the election, that's 24 hours after his inauguration, once he is actually in office. Earlier media reports and statements from Trump's inner circle indicated that this would entail freezing the war on current front lines and creating a demilitarized zone in the east, a claim also supported by the sources of Wall Street Journal. Russia currently occupies roughly 20% of Ukrainian territory in the south and the east and continues steadily pushing back Ukrainian defenders, albeit at the cost of heavy losses. It remains unclear who would police the 800-mile-long demilitarized zone, but an undisclosed Trump aide told the WSJ that Washington would demand European allies to send in their troops. This proposal is only one of the ideas circling around in Trump's team, and the president-elect has a tendency to make major policy decisions on the spot, the sources said. 2 of Trump's advisors, retired General Keith Kellogg and Fred Fleets, proposed in June to cease military aid to Ukraine unless it agrees to hold peace negotiations with Russia. At the same time, Kellogg said that the plan would entail additional warnings to Russia that the US would increase its military support to Ukraine if it refused the terms of the ceasefire. Fleet said Trump reacted positively to the plan, but added, I'm not claiming he agreed with it or agreed with every word of it. The plan also involved taking Ukraine's NATO accession off the table for an extended period in exchange for a comprehensive and verifiable peace deal with security guarantees. Ukraine submitted a request for NATO membership in 2022, but has not received an invitation, receiving a cold response from US President Joe Biden, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and others. Both Kiev and Moscow said it would not be possible to end the war within 24 hours, as Trump claims. Ukraine has been adamant about not recognizing Russian occupation of its territories, but has acknowledged some may have to be liberated by diplomatic means. In turn, Russia currently holds the upper hand on the battlefield, outnumbering and outgunning Ukrainian troops, likely having little incentive to seek a settlement. This is coming in line with previous comments, of course, that came from Donald Trump, and the video that we shared yesterday when it comes to Donald Trump talking about Ukraine and the fact that Ukraine is gone and that we need to have a solution. Now, we were close to a solution several months back. However, it appeared to be that Ukraine, when I say Ukraine, I mean Zelensky. Zelensky is the person leading Ukraine. He was under pressure from the United States administration to carry out instigatory attacks reckless attacks inside Russian territories that were not really in line with his defense actions inside of Ukrainian territories. That included the attack on the Russian nuclear facilities and the limited invasion of Kursk. That attack and the assumption that this was under pressure from the United States administration was due to the fact that it came just following a visit that Sergei Shoigu had to Iran, and the United States views Russian interference and support of Iran as something dangerous. The administration does, to say the least, and they potentially asked the Ukrainian president to go ahead and escalate in Russia so that they can get the message that we can keep you busy here and don't go too far when it comes to Iran, because we already have an equation that is being changed now by Iran, and the United States does not like the fact that Russia, Iran, and China are getting closer together, and they're seeing their influence fading away with time. So, interesting days ahead. These, I believe, were the main things that I wanted to talk to you about in this live stream. I'm going to just double check if I had any additional points that I wanted to talk to you about. No, that's about it. No, actually, I had one topic that I want to talk to you about. Another thing that I want to talk to you about. We always say how the Israeli army lies and the Israeli media lies. Now, of course, you have evidence coming from Israel, from within Israel. We had evidence coming from the 7th of October about the Israeli conduct and Israel killing its own citizens on the 7th of October that we spoke about many times, about some of those prisoners of war who were released, and many media outlets and social media outlets and mainstream media having such a big problem with the images that we saw of them shaking hands with the fighters of the resistance, releasing them, saying many positive things about them. It's as if some of these videos are not allowed to be published, and images. Alongside, of course, evidence when it comes to the 7th of October about the tanks targeting the Israelis, the evidence coming from the ground, Israelis who were there on the 7th of October saying that most of the civilians were killed due to fire from the IDF, and the aerial footage that came of Israeli planes brutally killing Israelis in the Nova Festival as well, alongside many things. But now we have more talks coming from the ground. We had this report in an Israeli website that spoke about a report about a UAV that was launched from Gaza last month. Now, we're not interested very much about the actual event itself, because we know the Palestinian resistance still has capabilities. They launched a missile on Israel yesterday, and they still have UAV capabilities. Imagine that, after Netanyahu claimed that he dismantled all of them. But what we're interested about are certain statements inside of this. So they said here that contrary to the IDF report, this is the first thing that we understand, contrary to the IDF report, meaning that the IDF is not really honest. The UAV launched from Gaza did not intercept and hit a military position exposure, or was not intercepted. Okay, and they are bringing certain statements coming from Israeli soldiers, where they stated that what the army, because I'm not going to read the whole thing for you, just to not waste too much time, the Israeli army are not releasing the accurate information when it comes to the UAVs targeting Israeli forces inside of Gaza and in other parts too. Although we were attacked and we were surprised by this attack, by a UAV attack coming from the Palestinian resistance, and the fact that they still have this capability. And according to the claims of the IDF troops, this endangers us. This puts us in danger. Why? Because the IDF does not want to publish information or accurate information, therefore be in denial, which leads to putting the lives of the soldiers at risk. Because if you deny that something is happening, firstly, you're creating a false sense of security and a false sense of confidence. Because if your troops are not anticipating certain attacks from the resistance in Gaza, in this case, then they are not really prepared for it. And what are they going to do in the future? And this small example here explains the whole campaign. Israel is already sending all of its army in Gaza in a manner or to a war that they are not trained to fight in. In war conditions, they are not trained to fight in. And we're just simply talking about military matters here. So you destroyed Gaza by your Air Force, and you want to go on a ground invasion. The troops, the Israeli troops, they are not trained to go and fight in a destroyed urban warfare. They are trained, or some of them are trained, to be more accurate, to fight in urban warfare. But in Gaza, you destroyed everything. That means you're not training, or you're not sending your troops to fight with confidence. Because instead of walking on a normal road, they're having to climb on destroyed rocks. And where they are aiming to shoot at a door, you're talking about a destroyed wall and ceiling and someone popping up from underneath it. And there's a very big difference between urban warfare and destroyed urban warfare. In essence, they're sending all of their troops to die for the political ambitions and the career ambitions of Benjamin Netanyahu. He is not sending them there being trained and equipped to the levels that are required for what Israel is actually doing in Gaza, which is total destruction, genocide, and mass war crimes. Meaning, now we are going to potentially have more and more revelations. We had previous revelations that came from Israeli leaders, previous leaders in the military establishment, who are in communication, in constant communication with the IDF soldiers on the ground. One of them was Yitzhak Brik, who I spoke about many times. And I gave one example in Rafah at the time, where he had several of the Israeli soldiers in Rafah telling him that all of the reports that are coming out to the media are false. We haven't dismantled Hamas here. We have people popping up from under the ground, and we're not seeing who we're fighting. It's as if we're fighting ghosts, and we're being killed, and we don't know where we're going on or what are we doing, which indicates there's a lack of vision as well when it comes to the campaign in the south. And that was confirmed today, actually, by Yoav Gallant. Yoav Gallant, the defense minister who was sacked in Israel, he had a meeting with the families of the Israeli prisoners of war inside of Gaza, during which he addressed the Philadelphia corridor. And on the Philadelphia corridor, he said, there is no military, there is no security need for our presence in the Philadelphia corridor, and there is no political need for our presence in the Philadelphia corridor, contrary to what Benjamin Netanyahu always claims. And if we don't have a security reason or a political reason to remain on the corridor, then we are putting our troops' lives at risk for no reason. This was confirmed by Yoav Gallant. And by the way, when it comes to Gallant, expect to hear more things coming out from him now that he has been sacked to the limit that he can say, because Netanyahu is now publishing information about him. They were monitoring him, and they had apparently sensitive information about certain figures in the army. So the lack of trust reached a level where Netanyahu is employing people directly to spy on the defense minister, to spy on certain top military figures, and have units within the IDF, like the report said a few days ago about the Sinwar plan, to hand Netanyahu the information directly without due diligence and without the chain of command authorization. So you have certain groups within the army, they do not report to their commander. The report doesn't go to the IDF chief of staff or whoever it is responsible about this information. And all of a sudden, this information is passed to Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu, therefore, can use it for any of his political gains, which indicates that there's a very big lack of trust when it comes to the Israeli army.